So we've finally come to the end of the month, the end of the unit, and the end of our discussion about Atlantis. We've been going on quite a few weeks about it. It feels like longer. I think it's finally time to conclude. So what I'm going to do today is show you a couple of videos to illustrate the point. Now, the truth is about Atlantis is that nobody really knows. There is no evidence that it ever existed beyond relics, stories, legends, and myths. It all began with Plato, hearing stories in Egypt about a civilization, I think it was 9,000 years ago, at the time when he was told the story, about a civilization falling into decay, an advanced civilization, leaders in technology and spirituality and understanding of the world around us, who eventually lapsed into arrogance, and then their civilization fell. Now, when Plato heard about this, he asked when this civilization was supposed to have stood, and he was given a date. And it was all written down in stone tablets, just like in Sumeria, where the stories of the Anunnaki from Nibiru were written down in Sumerian tablets. So this is all known. This is all history. Now, he was told, we've dated it back to 11,600 years before now. And that was left as it was. Now, most Egyptologists just said Plato lied or made the stories up, mostly to make a political point about culture lapsing into decay, which is it's a common political problem. When you look back at every society, every civilization, they've all got one thing in common: they fall, they fail. Every civilization eventually collapses. The more arrogant, the more powerful they get, the quicker they start to fall into decay. Look at America. America will be gone in 100 years. The way it stands today, America is going to be gone probably within 50 years. And China will be gone probably less than 100 years. That can't survive. They're building up way too fast. They're incredibly arrogant, and it's going to fall in on itself. It's going to collapse. Nobody wants what they're selling. And that's just nature. That's just the nature of history, which is maybe why the Americans don't teach history in their classes anymore, so that people don't see it coming. I don't think any of the civilizations we have on Earth at the moment are going to be around in 200 years. I think we're going to replace all of them because we have to. Every one of them has become corrupt. The United Nations is a joke. There isn't really a successful culture anywhere on Earth at the moment that's going to last. We need to replace it with something better. And that's what happened to this civilization, the Atlanteans. Now, 11,600 years ago, they were supposed to have disappeared. And everyone thought Plato was just telling stories. Nobody took him very seriously, even though Plato himself said many times over, this wasn't an allegory, this wasn't a legend, this wasn't a story he made up, it was absolute fact. And he's not the only other person that said it. Eventually, 11,600 years ago, they were able to do some research, and geology proved that yes, something happened. There was a great flood, and it destroyed a lot of ancient civilizations. Now, we know that in Egypt, the pyramid is much, much older than it's supposed to be. It's something like about 15,000 years old, although we teach that it's only 2. Egyptologists don't like it, but geology proves that the Great Pyramid and the Sphinx have been underwater, and that hasn't happened in the last 2,000 years. It hasn't happened for about 12,000 years, which proves they're a lot older than they're supposed to be. Egyptologists' answer to that is, well, how do we work with this? How do we prove this? And the geologists have returned and said, well, it's not up to us to prove how your dogmatic part of the science works. We're telling you it's been underwater. Do with that what you will. So there are a lot of people researching this, and I'm going to play you a video from one of the key researchers, Graham Hancock. Now, we've talked about him before. He wrote the book Fingerprints of the Gods. Again, a book we've referenced before. We showed you the introductory chapter about the Piri-Reis map, proving that Antarctica had been under ice. Hadn't been under ice thousands of years ago and was habitable. Now, he claimed in his book that Atlantis was a real place and that there was a huge cataclysm all around the Earth. And in Fingerprints of the Gods, he claims that most of the planet was uninhabitable. We're not really sure what caused the floods, magnetic pole shifts or something like that. Maybe Nibiru came close by. It actually was around that time. But something shifted on Earth and changed the way things were laid out. The outcropping effect of this is that there was a great flood and there was a reset. There was a global reset. Now, in his book, he claims that a small group of white people with long beards and blue eyes started appearing in these cultures all around the world and started building these pyramids, these structures, all around the same time. And there's text in Egypt where they said to them, why are you building this pyramid? And they replied, to make you gods. Now, this takes us back to the Bible stories about how God, who stands in for Satan in these stories, denied human beings the ability to speak to each other. It changed our languages, and it tried to stop us learning anything so that we would stay dumb and under control. And this takes us back again to the legends of Nibiru, where we were designed as slaves. So maybe if you follow the book, maybe these people broke free, took some of the technology with them, and managed to keep enough of it going to try and spread out on Earth the more advanced technology to create a new civilization, to rise from the ashes of what Atlantis had lost. The main one was Quetzalcoatl. You'll have to look this up in the book. I might be pronouncing that wrong. Quetzalcoatl was a Mayan god who was represented by the sort of deity figure illustrations, but who is recorded as being a white man, very white-skinned, and represented by the sigil of the serpent, the snake, which is what we see turned into the symbol of medicine today. The two snakes wrapped around a sword is learning, science, and medicine, even though in the Bible stories it tells us that they were evil because he was trying to get us to eat the apple of education. And I'm not the only person that believes that. I mean, Apple, the company, uses the symbol of an apple with a single bite taken out of it in reference to the Bible story of biting into the apple of wisdom. So a lot of people buy into this, a lot of people believe this. Now, as the story continues, as Graham Hancock's research continues, these people spread out, and they created all of these sort of temples and statues and constructions that were way, way ahead of their time and even defy description today. We see connections being formed between this one tribe and then these other tribes. They first connected with a group of black people who seemed to be Africans due to the idea that their statues were carved in South America that looked like Africans, who certainly don't look like South Americans. And we see movement around Earth that doesn't make sense. We see South Americans and what we call Native Americans looking very Asian, because at the time there was an apparent land bridge. So people around the world were moving much, much more than history tells us. And ancient civilizations seem to have the same root. So everything we're told about different races is probably wrong. We probably moved around Earth a lot more than we're told we did. Now, in the stories, there's a pretty awful story about the Spanish. Years later, the Spanish people, who were white at the time, moved into these Mayan areas, and according to their legends, they thought Quetzalcoatl's men had returned to bring them learning, and instead they slaughtered everybody. Just to show you how things corrupted yet again. So this tribe came out, tried to share some more advanced learnings, and the people that followed looked exactly the same and brought swords and slavery with them. It keeps showing you that we learn these things, and then, well, this is something that has been talked about a lot before. I know most of you have never heard of the book Animal Farm. I actually tried to get it onto the summer school syllabus. It was written by what's his name? George Orwell, about communism, about how a group of farm animals take over a farm, and eventually the pigs become the leaders because they consider themselves more intelligent, and eventually they take over, and they become the old leaders. When the animals look at them, they can't tell the pigs from the humans anymore. And that's how communism works. We get rid of the rich oligarchs, the royal family, we replace them with the people, and eventually corruption sets in and they end up being exactly the same as the one they left before. And this is something we see over and over in these ancient texts, how it's happened before, it will happen again. And eventually the elite will see themselves as being more powerful and will take on the rest of humanity as slaves. And I think that's what we're seeing at the moment on Earth. We're seeing a global movement towards that, towards the Great Reset, which will be socialism, which will be, I mean, socialism, the Great Reset is being sponsored by the giant corporations and the royal families around the world, who basically want to form a group who will take over everything and you will have no property. This is happening right under our noses. It's happening again. Another grab so that everything you own will be taken away from you, given to these people who are already rich, and eventually these people will be got rid of, and we'll replace them again, and it just keeps going round and round in this circle because we're not learning from the lessons of history. And this is what the story of Atlantis is all about. These people didn't learn their lessons. They freed themselves from slavery, they took some technology with them, they built up a culture and a society, and it fell because they failed to learn their own lessons. And that's really what Atlantis is meant to teach us. Now, I've given you the whole book. If you go to Google Classroom, Fingerprints of the Gods is right there. You can download it straight off Google Classroom and read the whole book. I suggest you do. It's a bit of a tough book to read because it's written by somebody who is not a novelist. He's a journalist, and he became a historian later in life. His writing style is pretty good, quite entertaining, but the book isn't laid out very logically. It kind of skips around a little bit. It is worth reading, and if you can be bothered, I suggest you stick with it. It's a really good book about how cultures come and go, and how we really do need to stop now, look at what we're doing, and learn some lessons. Now I'm going to let you watch a couple of videos. The first one is Graham Hancock talking about the discoveries of Atlantis and the technology, the science behind it, the history. And then I've got one more video to play you. So we're actually going to listen to the word of God. One of these ancient gods from these old civilizations, the words have been recorded on tablets, and Graham Hancock reads them out. And it reads like a warning about it's all happened before and it's going to happen again. And excuse me, and we keep going round and round in circles, and we're not learning our lessons. And I think that's going to be the lesson for today. So watch the videos. The first one gives you the introduction to what Atlantis is. Anyone that wants to know more, read the book. And there are lots and lots of good books. Graham Hancock has done a lot of TED Talks. He's done a lot of interviews. He's treated as a pseudoscientist, but he wrote these books a long time ago. And as geology has become a more recognized science, everything he said has been proved correct. So he's a very interesting character, and I think history is going to be very kind to him because everything he said has been proved right. So watch the videos. I think he gives a lot of answers about Atlantis. I think he's the only person giving any answers to Atlantis. There's a lot of questions that still need answers, of course, because we're going back on something that has no historical evidence beyond recordings of ancient peoples. There's a lot more to this story, and anybody that wants to is going to have to do their own research beyond this. And then listen to, I think it's Thoth, the Egyptian god, who's also recognized as other Egyptian gods and went through different incarnations. So we're literally going to listen to the word of God. How cool is that? All right, so enjoy the videos and we'll talk at the end.